Good morning, one and all, and welcome to the video. Happy New Year to one and all. In this video, I'll be teaching you how to use pyodbc. We'll be writing an object-oriented class. So what we're trying to do in this, all right? So we are trying to develop a Python classes or modules that we can reuse across. So the job here is to write a SQL Server module. I know pyodbc already has fetch one, fetch many. So we want to write our own custom methods, a top-level library on the top of that. I'll be showing you some design patterns that you can use down the line, such as we'll be using context manager. Context manager is not a design pattern, but we'll be using Singleton Design pattern. So let's get started with this video. It's gonna be fun, fun programming session, all right? So let's get started. I have my code snippets right here. So the very first thing that I'm thinking before starting programming is essentially, let me switch my screen. So the first of all, we need to define some libraries, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'll try to import all the libraries over here. So the first thing I would do is import OS and import JSON. And then I wanna import pyodbc module. Okay, and at the end, if these modules are not there, I would like to raise an exception. So I would say, I don't want my code to go after that point. So I'm gonna say error, and then I will try to print the string error. And then let's print the exception, okay? So our first part is done. You can collapse in IntelliJ by pressing Control Shift and minus on your keyboard. Automatically that folds your code. So what next? Well, we need to define a class which essentially can hold our settings or credential, such as server name and all that, right? So what I'm thinking here is the best way to do this would be define a class, and we'll encapsulate that. So let's say, I'm trying to use camel case here, so we'll call this class database credentials, or let's call secrets. We can also call it secrets. For now, let's call it secrets. Remember, these are all gonna come from an environment variable in your code. You'll never hard code it anything in your code. So that's that. Now what we want to do is the first thing over here in this this particular in the constructor would take following attributes, right? We would define a port, it would take a server, right? So let's define a server. So the user or the guy would essentially pass all these details, and let's try to make everything a little neat. I like to pretty much use a tool called black. This essentially helps you to format your code. So as you can see, black runs sample. Oops, seems like we have a small issue with the black tool, and that is because I have not completed my constructor. So I have completed my constructor now, and let's try to run the tool. It should automatically format the code for us. So let me see. Oops, sorry, my bad. I think missing a colon there. Okay, so let's try to run the formatter, and now you can see the tool automatically has formatted my code into a single line. Looks much more better, right? So for SQL Server, the port would be 1443. So that's that. Now, well, we need to essentially define this. So the user can pass all these credentials. He can set the secrets, and once the secrets is set up, well, we can essentially do the job. So let's start defining all of these in the constructor. So over here on this line, I'm gonna use the word self, and then I'm gonna use the port, server, UID, PWD. Essentially, these are all the settings that the user can pass in. Now what I'm gonna do is, you remember, people, we gotta use slots here. What is slots? Well, slots will allow preventing adding attributes at runtime. So we wanna use slots. Also, it helps to write Python classes which are much more memory efficient. What I mean by that is, by default, all these are stored in a dictionary, which consumes more memory, which is why you want to use slots while writing code. So I'll define my slots here. Before that, I'll show you about slots and all. But for now, okay, so this is good, right? Now, what we need to do is we need to form that connection string. There you go. There is my connection string. And what I'm trying to do is all these variables. I essentially wanna create getters and setters. I could do that, but for now, let's keep things simple. And yeah. So now over here, I'll define my slots, and these slots are essentially gonna be these variables that I plan to use. So in this case, I'll be using the port, server, and as you can see, as I'm adding this on the list, IntelliSense is removing those squiggly complaints, okay? So this will prevent adding attributes at runtime, and it's much more efficient as well. So that's that. Okay, so I have defined my slot, and at this point I would again run the tool black. So I'm making sure that I'm following PEP8, right? So it looks beautiful, nice. You see, black usually formats your code, and I'm gonna make a couple of enters here so we could better read this code, okay? And again, I'll use the tool called black, and I'll run sample.py. This should essentially format all the code for me according to the PEP8. So this looks beautiful, right? Now what we need to do is, we don't want anyone to essentially, or we could, I mean, the way I'm thinking is the user will pass all these, and then we'll simply inherit these items, okay? But if you want to override, you can override, but essentially all these should be coming from an environment. So we'll say os dot get env, we'll use the word. So all these would be an environment variable. If not, you can also set, if you want, you can also use the default as well. But for now, I'm gonna leave it like that. Okay, let's keep moving. Now Control-Shift- on your keyboard to collapse everything up. So as you can see, we have a constructor with all the attributes. Okay, at this point, this is ready. Now what we need to do is we need to write our SQL Server class, which will essentially connect to the database, right? So remember, I'm thinking here to use a context manager. Well, what is a context manager? Well, if you have used something called with open, like when you have opened a file, well, behind the scenes you are opening, you are using a context manager in Python. Well, context manager essentially, it behind the scenes, it automatically opens and closes the file. So you don't need to worry about opening a file, then closing a file. Those are the essentials of a context manager. Now, this should ask you a question. Well, yeah, that's great. How would you use context manager in a database? Well, whenever we work with database, right, we want to connect to the database, then we want to disconnect to the database, cursors and all. So I don't want to all the time. I want to do like connect, disconnect. So which is why I'm going to define my context manager. So I'm going to write a class called SQL Server. So this is a class that would allow it to connect to the, this is a class that would allow it to connect to the SQL Server. Now over here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the colon, right? And then I'm going to define my constructor over here. But as I said, I want to use context manager, right? So, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to define a method called enter. And then I'm going to define a method called exit. I think it's called exit, my bad. Okay, so I'm going to define these. What this does, and I'll show you in a second. So automatically, whenever whenever I use a context manager, automatically these methods are invoked, and I'll try to show you as much as I can. So if you see, so think of this as a context manager, and F is the instance. Okay, for now I'm just going to use the pass and try to run this and show you. So you should see the constructor invoked first, then the enter method, and then the exit. Well, this is exactly the job of context manager, right? Which is why I wanted to use that. Okay, so far we are doing great, right? So that's great. Now what we need to do is essentially, once you have defined the context manager, well, now we have all the settings and the connections, right? So what we need to do is we can use an injection model here, or we can inject the set. So either you can define all the settings and then inject the instance of this class called secrets in the SQL Server, and then you can do a type check. You could do that approach, or you can directly create an instance in the class here called composition. But however you decide to lay off your classes, I usually, I'm a big fan of usually inheriting stuff. I like inheritance a lot, which is why I am gonna use inheritance in this module as well. So what I'm gonna do is this class is gonna inherit from secrets. Now I'm gonna invoke the secrets base class constructor. I'm passing the word self. Now, as you can see, it has stopped complaining. Now at this point, once I've done the inheritance, I have invoked the base class constructor. What I can do is I need to create a pyodbc connection object, right? So which is where this line right here will come into place, and take a look at how things will be done now. So self.connection is equal to pyodbc.connect. And remember, since we are inheriting, I have access to all these attributes in the class. So over here, I can simply use the word self.connection string, through which I would be having access to the base class, okay? Because we are using inheritance. You could use an injection model, but I personally prefer inheritance. I like it much more. So that's that, okay? So once you have defined the connection object, now you tell me what do we need to do? every time essentially, you have to create a cursor object, you'll execute something, then you'll iterate, and then essentially you're gonna close the connection, or cursor, however you want to call, right? So over here, what I'm thinking is, the way I'm thinking to design this is, so first of all, I'm thinking, give me a second, because I'm doing this from scratch. So first of all, on an enter method, I would love to create a cursor object. So what I would do is I would say self.connection.cursor. So I'm creating a cursor object here. So we'll say okay, so you're creating a cursor object, and now we can call here. Okay, so we want to close the connection here, right? Essentially, once you're done, you want to close it, right? You don't want to keep it open, right? So over here in this method, I would essentially, close the cursor, self.cursor dot. I think it's connection, or was it cursor? I don't exactly remember. Let me double check on the syntax. I just have to double check. Yeah, it has been a while. Give me a 1 second. pyodbc, pyodbc, stack, pyodbc. I just want to see the syntax, pretty often nobody remembers all the syntax by heart, right? Which is why I try to, and I'm not going to edit the video because I'm referring to Zygrapho. That's what all the developer does, right? So yeah, you create a cursor object, then you close the cursor object, and then you close the connection. So we'll execute .close method here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say .cursor, .close, and also remember you did this so since you're using the word self, you have access throughout this class, okay? And now I also need to close the connection, right? So as you can see on the Stack Overflow connection, right? Our connection is here. So self.connection.close. So I'll close the connection here because in this I don't need anything. So my context managers are looking great so far, okay? Now simply we need to define methods. So Control-Shift-minus to drop everything down. Now at this, let's also define a beautiful dunder stir method, which tells, this the class name. Okay, so if you try to print the instance, it would print SQL Server object. Instead of printing the address, we are overriding the _str method, right? Which is good. Now I need to define simply 2 methods, right? Essentially one method is to get data, and the second one to insert, of course. So define, we'll use snake case, okay? And as you can see, again, I'll try to use the tool black to format my code. So black sample.py, it reformatted my code, according to PEP8. So remember, a good programmer would always try to write comments, right? So essentially, I'm just writing some notes. This would be executed before creating the class instance. This would be the dunder exit method would be invoked. Remember, it's all about how you write, right? So the code. So I can give here exactly, I can say this. Okay, so I said this will essentially close the exit out my connection. Okay, looks good, beautiful. Now get data, right? So remember, now in the get data, first of all, this would take a query, right? Based on a query. So we'll pass in a query, and with the given query, what we want to do, first of all, we want to execute the query. So we'll say self.cursor.execute query, whatever the query the user passes. We need to also grab all the columns. In SQL, you could do that by using the word cursor.description, and you can grab all the column. So say you select everything from people table, right? And the table name is people. So whatever columns are there, the word description, this would essentially create the column. Now, what I'm trying to do is I usually am a big fan when I want to get data. I like to have data in an array of objects. So which means, which has the column name and their value in an object. And essentially, as I said, array of objects, right? So I made my columns, right? And now what I need to do is here again. Also, remember, if you say select star from a table, well, you don't want to read data, everything. You want to read data in batches, or the way you call that is in curse. You wanna All I'm trying to say, if there are a million records in a SQL table and you're writing fetch data, select everything, your code is gonna crash because all that data is gonna be loaded in memory, right? On an array. It's no good. So we want to read data in batches or chunks, right? So that's where we could leverage the use of fetch many stuff. So what I'm gonna do over here, guys, is I'm gonna write a while loop. So while true, which means it's gonna execute all the time. And another thing that this would take is the batch size. So for example, if you provided a table and instead you said like, hey, select star everything. Well, by default, the batch would be 10, which means it would give you data in the batches of 10, right? So over here, what you want to say is over here, you want to say result is equal to self.cursor.fetch many, and we want to provide the batch size, which means, hey, grab the batch, okay? Now, remember, you don't want to use return statement, or you don't want to append data like, you don't want to do this and then you say declare an array. Well, what's the use of this then? What's the use of batch? Well, you're again populating the in-memory data structure. So a good software engineer or someone experienced Python developer would use something called generators. Well, generators are pretty efficient, right? You can read more about generators, right? So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna use an else block, and I'm gonna simply use, I'm gonna try to zip things up. So items is equal to, I'm trying to use a list comprehension. So what I would do is for data in, I'm gonna say results, whatever the batch size result it is, right? And what I will do is I want to zip that with the columns, and then of course the data, right? I want to zip that and convert this into a dictionary. So I'll use the built-in method dict, which allows you to convert into dictionary. I'm not sure why this is column spelling mistake. So this allows the code to get the data in an array of objects, right? So I'm trying to make it pretty generalized, okay? So at this point, I can again run the tool black. It should reformat my code. As you can see, it really did. Now at this point, you don't want to return it. You want to use the word, a good Python developer would always try to use the word yield, and you want to yield an item. So essentially, this returns a generator object. If there are no data, it's gonna it's gonna raise top iterations. But this is exactly how you want to write your SQL Server classes in Python. So my context manager is ready, my get data is ready. Okay, so it's gonna take care of creating a cursor object, then essentially closing the cursor and closing the connection, because by default exit and enter would it would execute is what I'm trying to say. Okay, this looks beautiful, fantastic. Okay, now what else, right? What we could all do is again this SQL Server class. We could make this as because remember, we don't want to create multiple instances, because I could literally do this, right? I would create several instances of the class. That's where I could leverage the use of something called meta class, or we can create a Singleton Design pattern. It's usually good whenever using database, you wanna maybe use Singleton Design pattern. It essentially would only create one and only one single unique instance, right? So let's start writing a class called Singleton. Or we can call these Singleton. So over here, all I'm trying to do is I'm gonna define essentially a dictionary called instance. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna invoke the dunder call method here. So, and I'll explain you what this does. If class not in class.instance, that means if the instance is not there in the class.instance, and allow me to correct the name quickly. So we are saying that, hey, if class not in class.instance, which means over here, if the instance is not there, then essentially create the class instance and append it to that dictionary, right? And then return that. Else it's gonna return none, which means you cannot create multiple instances of the classes, right? Now, in order to use this meta class, and as far as I remember from my code snippets a little bit, it has been a while I've done this, but if I'm not mistaken, and I can refer my GitHub snippets, because I have been doing a lot of, yeah, there you go. So you just have to use the word meta class and then that. So let's try that out. So I'm not sure if that would go well with the context manager, but let's try this out. So we're gonna use the word, this Singleton class, let's put it up here. and then let's define singletons, and we'll also inherit from secrets. Let's see if this looks good. This looks absolutely insane, like pretty good. So we have a design pattern. We're using context manager as well. So everything looks good. Now, black sample. Wait, we have some failed. So the reformatter tool, for some reason, I don't know why, but it failed. So let's see. I don't see any error in the code essentially. Yeah, looks good. Not sure why the reformatter tool did not work with that meta stuff, but it's fine. So let's try to use 2 space. Oops. Let's try to use 2 space. 1 more space here. So every spaces between every class should be two lines, right? So that's that. So we defined our secrets. We use slots over here. We defined this as well. Now, if you really wanted, what we could also do, I'm just gonna do it right now and show you. So we don't want to even provide anyone essentially to access these stuff, right? Which is why what my recommendation would be while writing code is I'm gonna use get-env, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So you use port. Let's copy this. Okay, and define server. So the only thing that I want the user to have access is, and I'll define both as a private variable, because I don't want anyone to have access to these variables or change that. Then in that case, I have to remove slots. I know that, but I just wanted to show you this as well in case. So let's comment out that part. Okay, so over here, since these are private variable, you could do that. Could do that. This is again another pattern that you can use while designing classes, right? So now what I want to do, I'm defining essentially all these as a private, which means from outside the user does not. So now if I want to change this variable, the only thing that the user can do is I'm telling the user I'm gonna define a property decorator. So let me see, property, and define, use the word connection. So now essentially I'm encapsulating these. This should be, I should have used not the camel case, but it's fine. So let me see what is going wrong. Why is it my IntelliSense complaining? Unresolved attribute reference connection for class secrets. Okay, no problem. No problem. I think not sure. Oh, there was an extra underscore. I was like, it should work. I was like, so whatever. Let's essentially use this one. Okay, and let's also try to, if a user wants to set that, well, we'll provide him. We'll provide him a way to set that as well. So we can use the word setter, and again, same class name. We can pass in value, and then we can say self dot connection string. If the user wants, we could do that. Other than that, I'm essentially, I'm trying to encapsulate my class over here. This would be really nice if I could use a, yeah, I don't like this because I want to use camel case. Python is a snake case, not a camel case. So we'll remove these ones right here, over here, over here, and double. We can remove that one. Connection. Now my code looks much better, just the way I like it. So that's that. Okay, now Control-Shift-minus to collapse everything up. So now the only thing that you can change in the secret class is essentially the connection string, and that to a property decorator. Now I'm in the SQL Server class. Of course, I need to change a couple of things, as you can see. Now the only way to get access of, now remember, I'm inheriting, which means I cannot inherit all these attributes as it's private, but what I can inherit, and so I can use the property decorators, or I can set the value if I want to, using self dot connection string is equal to some value. I can do that, but I'm using the getters now, so this should essentially do the job for me. So yeah, it's coming along pretty nice, right? So let's clear that up. Black, I don't know why the black tool is not working for some reason, but that's fine. So as I said, now you have a get data method. Similarly, you can create a method called insert also. So insert. Okay, so now what, and remember this returns a generator object. So let's write a comment while this return object batch size okay, query, this is gonna be a string. Always write, please write, have a habit of writing comments. A lot of people don't do that, but please write comments. Okay, so the last part that I need to do is I need to write a insert, right? In both the case, if you see, I'm passing in query, right? Query is common. Couldn't I move that on the constructor level? Maybe in the constructor, yeah, because you're duplicating the word query, right? So which is why I have decided, to move this part as here. So then I need to, or define that in the constructor query. It's all about, I feel it's all about planning, right? How you plan your classes, So now I gotta use the word self. So that's all, right? Now over here, I'm in the insert statement. So I'm gonna copy my code snippets and then try to refactor it. So over here, I have query. I don't need to do that. Cursor. Okay, I essentially create a cursor object. I think I don't have to do that because I have already created a cursor object in the enter. So, you don't have to even do that. So this part I'm good. Cursor, I can use the word self.cursor, execute the query. I can commit it if I want, but the context manager should take care of it. I can use the word commit, that's fine, but the closing part, I think the context manager would take care of it. So that's that, and then all I need to do is essentially return a Boolean value so the user gets to know. So returns a Boolean. Takes a query and does that. So all the modules are ready for SQL Server with pyodbc. Well, now if you wanna, we can simply use and if you want, you can, of course. I thought my IntelliSense will complete that, but unfortunately it did not, but it's fine. All right, so now you could use your code amazingly like this, a SQL Server. It takes a query object, right? Instance, and then you can say instance dot, you can execute methods. For example, remember we have a method called, I think, get data. So you can use the get data. It would take care of the connection string and all of that. Wait, why is this giving me squeak? Cannot have a reference get data in a none. Wait, that doesn't make sense. I should be able to use the instance for, oh, I know why, because I missed one small thing. This should return self, and now it should solve the problem. There you go. Okay, so that's that, and there you go. That's how you write top level modules and packages with pyodbc. We use context manager, we use Singleton Design pattern and all that, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'll leave this code in the description. Try to do it, So this is a very good practice for your oops, your inheritance. We use concepts of inheritance, right? So you have to know when you can inherit property decorators. We use context manager. We try to use slots. Yes, I think it's all good practices, right? So I would say give it a shot, right? Give it a try and see how it goes. Now, with that being said, thank you so much for watching the video. I hope you have, let me try to switch my web camera. It takes a little while for that to load. Not sure why is that not loading. There you go. But thank you so very much for watching this video. I hope you have really enjoyed how to write top level packages of pyodbc. You can create, not only that, this is just a start. Well, you can create interfaces now, which means, let me show you one more thing and then I will stop talking as I said. But how do I switch my screen? There you go. So this is SQL Server, right? Let's say you have Redshift, you want to connect to Redshift. So create, so you see what I'm trying to say is all these will have get method and insert, right? So tomorrow if you have a class called Redshift, I'm just making it up. See, I'm trying to show you how to lay out big Python projects, right? So let's call this Redshift. So, well, if you see, you want to have an interface, right? These and these are following an interface, which means any moving forward, if you add any sort of database connection, they should have a get data and insert, irrespective, right? So that means you can also add an interface. So you can say from ABC meta import interface, from ABC meta import, what was that? ABC, and then you can create an interface and then also do all that. So as I said, Python is just not like about functions and yeah, a little bit here and there. You could really build a lot of things with Python, right? As I said, you could build libraries, frameworks, oh, there's a lot more, right? You could also develop a threaded version of SQL Server with the batch, but I would, keep this video here and hope you have really enjoyed watching this video, and hopefully my webcam loads as always, it takes a while to load. There you go. So yeah, thank you so much. I hope you have enjoyed this nice walkthrough on pyodbc. If you have any more questions, list your question in the comments and we can talk about it, right? With that being said, stay safe, keep yourself, stay safe and be healthy, right? With that being said, thank you so much for watching. Keep smiling, keep coding, keep learning, and I will see you guys in the upcoming next video. Thank you so much, guys.